All right, so I am going to officially call to order the December 5th meeting of the Economic Development Committee. This is a virtual meeting. Present is Tony Dominic, Jason Burgess, JJ Shea, Heather Monroe, Savas, and Alexia. Present as well, as long as Chuck Putney is a member of the public. All right, so yeah, let's get into the agenda. So the first item on the agenda was approving meeting minutes from November 7th. Jason sent them to me. I either inadvertently deleted the email. I'm not sure what happened, so I did not forward them to the group. So we're just going to skip that one for this time if everyone's okay. I'll get those out tonight, and then we'll review them at the next meeting, as long as we're okay with that. So the next thing on the agenda was the status of revised committee charge and deliverables. We only have Heather for a brief period, so I'm going to defer to her on an update on that one. Heather, are you okay giving an update while you're driving?
Yeah, I can give an update now. I haven't left the driveway yet because I don't know if you know this, but it's a little slick out.
Just a little.
Yeah. What I missed the one spot. What am I giving an update on, Tony?
Just where we are on the review on the revised committee charge and deliverables. I think it was going to the select board potentially.
Yes, and then I think I had it on one of the renditions and then it pops back off. So let me stick it back. I have to send out the materials tonight, so let me just revise the agenda and I'll put it back on for Monday night. I think we've gone through a couple renditions of the agenda.
Yeah.
So I think it popped off. So we'll get it back on there. And then we'll go from there.
Okay. I don't think it hinders us from anything that we're currently doing. I mean, it's slow going right now anyway, especially with the zoning, update the bylaw changes and everything in the not going through. So thanks, Heather, for championing that. We appreciate it. I'm going to jump down one more item just because this is for Heather also. I want to jump down to the status of creating the EDC online presence. So if I can defer back to you on that one, Heather, is there anything I can do with that? Or do we have you have a lot on your plate. So I know we talked about creating a Google account or, some sort of official account, and email and et cetera for the EDC. Is that something I can champion? Do you need to do that? What's the scoop there?
No, I think we can totally work on that together, Tony. I would want to check just real quick with IT and make sure they have no objections to us putting out a Gmail account. I think the biggest thing to be careful about is we just need to remember that we don't want, if multiple people have access to a document, we don't want everyone to be able to edit the document because then it becomes a deliberation and then we have an open meeting law violation. So
yeah, that's correct. Right.
So, but we can, the nice thing about Google is it has public facing sites. So we can make materials available to the public. We can make resource materials available to everyone and kind of limit who has the ability to add files, edit, and delete, and then have a much better control. But I think what we can do, Tony, is I have a standing meeting once a week with IT, and I have that tomorrow. I can bring that up to them, and then maybe you and I, if the community is okay with it, can have a conversation with IT directly, just the three of us, and see what we can come up with that we think will meet the needs of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and what I'll do, I think that'd be perfect. And if we get to that point and we can create it like a best use, or best practices guide that is out there, so we know, who can use it, how they can use it, et cetera. So, but that would be great. I love it. All right, excellent. So backing up to item number 3, which was, reviewing the special town meeting results and next steps. It was for anyone who was there, it was definitely a heated meeting, but it, in all fairness, is a really well-attended meeting. I went back through and looked at, sorry about that. I went back through and looked at, town meeting attendance over the past several years. And I think we averaged less than 100, and we had 300 people there. So, there's a lot of good getting that kind of attention, right? I think in a town this size, we were really working hard to kind of get a message out there. It's ultimately up to people to decide what they want, right? We know I think a lot of us felt pretty comfortable. I know me personally, I felt pretty comfortable with, what was created and put out there, but clearly I don't live in that zone. And, there was a lot of heated um, feelings, rightfully so, in different directions with that. So I don't really know what's next. I think it was just important for us to bring it up. Anybody else who was there has anything to, bring up or say about it, we can definitely do that here. I think the most impactful thing for this committee is, you know, we still have plenty to do moving forward. Like in some ways, if the map more so than the bylaws passed, it would be pretty full steam ahead. There might be a lot going on right now. We still have basic infrastructure and things like that to build. So we have plenty to do. I'd really like to see us get this Google account set up and then use these meetings to really decide what are things that we can keep doing for existing businesses in town. I still, I know we've talked about building a database of that. I think having kind of our Google account set up to store that in a secure central location instead of on in my Google Docs account or something like that is a better way to go. So it's baby steps right now. But if anybody else has agenda items or other things you think we need to be focusing on, we've really been focused on talking about the zoning bylaws and stuff like that. So now that we've moved past that, anything you guys have, to add to the agenda or bring to the table, definitely, bring it up here, get that to me. So I think under the bullet here of the special town meeting and what's next, if anybody has any ideas right now, things they want to see added to the agenda, added to our, tasks, I think our focus is um, existing businesses in town. How do we build that structure? How do we connect people? Um, I've had a few people. There's not many spaces for new business, so we have had a few people reach out about new businesses, and we've been trying to help them. So I hooked up somebody who's not just me. Alexia kind of brought this up, and we hooked up some people with Rick at the soccer asylum who has some space there that can potentially be used commercially. So someone who's looking to open an ice cream stand. So they're working right now. I had somebody reach out to me from Charcuterie Woo, which is a business that's run in town, and I pointed her. Actually, Chuck Putney's on here as a member of the public, and we can, when we get to the public session, Chuck, we can talk about whatever you wanted to talk about. But I did get her in touch with the realtor who's in charge of the commercial space available in the center of town. Those are things on a small scale. I've been trying to do. I think we have so many great people in this group. As we get a better grasp on who are the businesses in town, are there any other commercial spaces that we don't know about? I think this committee, we really want to know that, who we have operating a business, what areas in our limited business district or in kind of the spot type of zoning that exists are available. That's the kind of things I'd really like to get a grasp on. I want someone who has a great business idea and doesn't know where to go with it to come to us and say, hey, is there a space? How do I get started? So those are a lot of the focus. But does anybody else have anything related to the meeting or what they think we need to do next, now that the zoning bylaws and the expanded map didn't pass? Does anybody else?
Yeah, I had a question of just kind of like in general, like what's next? Like,
Yeah, it's a good
so
question.
like for like just I guess like the zoning stuff in particular, like yeah, it didn't pass, but like what's the next step now that it didn't pass? Is it gonna eventually go back out for vote again at some point? Is it gonna be like back to the drawing board and figure out what maybe they need to change? Are we involved in like that process?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I wasn't the chair of this committee or even on this committee when this first happened. I think this committee was involved, right? And
Yes.
Heather may have more to add than me to this. Oh, sorry, Heather, go ahead. Yeah, what do you want to
No
say
worries.
that?
So yeah, so when we had the original steering group, we did have someone from EDC. Savis was on a good portion of it. Jeremy was on some of it in the kind of midstream, and Savis stayed on for a good portion. So the longest standing economic development person who was able to add most input was
Oh, Heather, we're losing you. Your connections. We'll give her a minute.
Still hear
Yeah, you're cutting out pretty bad. So I don't know if it's.
me?
Yeah, that's right. I'll stop if you cut back in, Heather. But I think yeah, I don't have as much history as Heather does, but I know there were people involved. You know, if anybody who was involved, Savis or anyone, if you want to speak to that, I think as far as going forward, I'm just starting to have those conversations and figure out, you know, what's next. So I don't know for sure what's next, whether there'll be a smaller version. You know, I'm happy to share my opinion. One place where I was a proponent of this personally, you know, but again, I have all the respect in the world for the people who aren't, right? It's it goes both ways. As far as this committee goes, you know, one of the things that I wasn't, there were a lot of questions that came up about the financial aspects of, you know, let's say the new zoning map passed, and you know, there were a lot of questions around like how does it bring new revenue in. I didn't have good answers for that. I'll be honest with you. You know, I feel like that's something before something else happens as a committee, maybe we can focus on and understand, you know, better if there's a smaller push to do another zoning or maybe in a different area. Are we going to make changes as a town to make sure that there is financial gain from it, right? Because there were some really good legitimate questions that came up. So what if somebody buys 3 properties in the new zoning district, levels them, and puts up 1 building? You know, I can't do the math behind that. Your actual assessment may go down, you know. So and that may not be true either. But I think that was the problem, is we didn't have good answers for that on the financial side. So I'd like to have those discussions within this committee before, you know, kind of a double branch. I do want to know what's next, but then I also think, you know, we need to get whether it's speaking with the assessor or maybe Heather can, you know, get us that information or whatever. But I'd like to talk about that here and really understand before something else happens, you know, how it's financially advantageous, you know, to the town and brings new revenue in, because that's a big focus. Does that answer your question, JJ?
Yeah, a little bit. I think the other
Vaguely.
thing, I think the other thing too that didn't really get brought up at the meeting, but like after the meeting, like just kind of thinking about it, like just like the current businesses and how like the current businesses that are on 122, you know, you have the nurseries, the auto shops, you know, those are grandfathered in, but they're not currently zoned as business. I guess like I think part of like after seeing how like the vote went, and how, you know, there was a lot of people against it, but like I wonder if maybe putting that as a vote of itself, of like being like, hey, this is a separate issue. We want the current businesses that are there to, you know, be rezoned. And if like if anything, at least that was done, I think it would at least be more helpful for us, because then, you know, those people can then move forward, fix their businesses, do what they need. If they want to sell, you can bring another business into that spot. Because right, isn't that currently what's those things,
Yeah,
those businesses aren't zoned right now as
I've heard the
businesses, right?
same feedback. Heather's probably chomping at the bit to be able to address a lot of this, right? She may have better
Yeah.
answers. I know there's a concept of like spot zoning that you have to be careful of.
Okay.
But
Yes.
again, yeah, go ahead, Heather. Sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, maybe the cell phone gods are with me. Excellent.
For now.
So yes, so going back a little bit, so on the what's next answer, so most towns generally send their zoning bylaws to be worked on by the planning board. The problem is it's such a huge task. It usually bogs down a planning board for a year or 2. That's why we took it outside of it, did it as a steering committee with representatives from planning, zoning, and, you know, everything we could essentially touch. Moving forward, what we're going to do, what my recommendation is going to be to the select board, as well has already been to the planning board, is that the planning board pick this up. You know, the bulk of the work is already done. Now it's just more public information, more public sessions, more hearings, more feedback, more tweaking. So it will come back up at the next couple of town meetings. I don't know at what order it will come back up, or if it'll come back up as in an entire unit or in pieces. It's going to depend, right? Because we still have to deal with the MBTA piece, which does have a timeline to it. As far as
Right.
the second question, Tony, you hit it, which is we have to be careful of spot zoning. some people a little bit more afraid of spot zoning than others. Talking to legal, as long as we can justify it really well and it's gone through a thorough and thoughtful planning process, maybe. But that's essentially what you'd be doing. You'd be looking at every business that already exists in town, and that to do today would have to be zoned for that, and then you zone it for business. But that, keep in mind, that's an idea that's already been floated, but the only downside potentially is the same folks who had some opposition, they might still oppose this because it also, if all of a sudden I have a business and now my business is actually zoned for business, now I could sell it to someone else for a different type of business
Right.
where I might have been stuck previously.
So I think the answer to your question though, JJ, is that there are things happening, and Heather, I assume as this goes forward, or I shouldn't say assume, but I hope that this committee in some way, shape, or form can be a part of it, whether it's a representative. I don't care if it's myself or someone else. There's a lot of great people on this, so but we'll be able to be a part of whatever the discussions are going forward, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Okay.
the only thing we're gonna do differently at this point is because, like I said, all of the work is substantially done. I think we're just gonna turn it over to the planning board and just let them lead with it. So everything would just be done at the planning board's meetings. So anytime we wanted EDC to have like a really large part, we could do a joint meeting, or alternatively, we could just send a representative to, kind of pay attention, see what's going on. And bring back feedback to the planning board side.
Are the
Okay.
planning board meetings, are those gonna be like public, or
Well,
are those usually? Yeah,
all meetings of public bodies are public,
yeah, okay.
and open to the public.
Mhm.
We are trying to work on getting the planning board to be able to be televised.
Okay.
And also definitely recorded on Zoom in the meantime until we get to such point that we can get it televised.
Gotcha.
As you can imagine, it's hard with the public safety building because it only has so many days and times. We're currently having network issues still and connectivity issues at the COA. So sometimes it makes the connectivity unreliable at best.
And Heather, I know we're losing you soon. This might be a loaded question. You may not have time to
Yeah.
answer it. Is there a path related to, is there a path related to the zoning bylaws and map and all that, where it gets to a ballot instead of a town meeting? And that comes from me. That's just because for me, like right now, we hold our town meetings in a venue that's only can hold about 10% of registered voters. I have no idea what our plan is if 20, 30, 40, 50 percent of voters ever tried to show up. But you could solve that if it's in a ballot, but I don't know if there's an option for that.
No, so it would still, regardless, it still has to go to town meeting because it's a zoning bylaw or even general bylaws, like they require the vote of town meeting. You can't bypass it with a vote.
Okay.
Sometimes you can do questions that are just, they're non-binding questions on the ballot, right? Would you like the wall to be white or green? Do you want us to pursue this or pursue that, right? So that's always a possibility, but it would be a non-binding, it would just be an opinion oriented
Gotcha.
piece. There's lots of pieces to the bylaws. I think what ended up happening is people got so wound up on the map that they couldn't see the rest of the bylaw document that was in transition to be revised.
Right.
So I think in working with the planning board, that's a conversation that has to happen, right? Which is just strategically, like we have to get some of this stuff taken care of. It's outdated. We're not even compliant with some of the state laws with the language on things and so forth. So, how do we do it? Do we do it in piecemeal? Do we start with just MBTA? And then when we have a special town meeting in the fall, then we fix the rest of the bylaws. Then the next meeting, we look at, zoning those spot issues or what have you. I don't know. But I think those are all conversations and discussions that are going to be happening in near future. But I apologize, I do have to run.
Okay.
Okay. I just have one other comment on that. Sorry, Heather, I know you have to run, but
No worries.
like the last town meeting, it didn't start till like 8:30. So is it always at that time? I know that it was supposed to start at 7, but like a lot of families in town could not make it because obviously they have young kids, put them to sleep and all, the night routine. So is it always at that time for a specific reason, or can it be earlier in the day, just so like everyone has the ability to attend these meetings?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Essie. I get it every time I go down to the senior center because I hear a lot from folks
Sure.
that at a certain point they don't like driving at night, right? So I hear the question all the time. It's a good question. I believe our bylaw currently has it so that like it's at 7 o'clock at night. That being said, there's ways around it. Other towns also sometimes they have them on Saturdays or they have
Okay.
them at 7. So unfortunately, those are like the only two options, right? Because if you're not going to have it at 7 o'clock at night, the only other time you're really going to have it is at 7 on Saturday, rather, because people aren't going to be able to make it to the meeting otherwise.
Sure.
So there's a give or take. That's actually on the agenda for Monday as part of the discussion.
Okay.
to
And maybe
figure
the
that
venue
out.
also, Heather, like, is there a larger venue like Anna Maria or
Yeah.
something? Like there wasn't enough parking, and that,
Yeah,
like,
a lot of people like had left because there wasn't parking and
yeah.
the
So
line
that
was too long to get in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've already had process questions as to, what worked, what didn't work, what we should do differently and so forth. So we'll be working at all of that coming up and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Sounds
excellent.
good. Thank you, Heather.
All right,
Buzzers were great.
guys.
Keep using the buzzers.
Yeah, those are good.
Yes.
We're gonna see. Now we just need funding to get our own. So,
There we go.
all right. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything on the meeting? It was, again, it was a huge turnout. It was, that part of it is great. I think there's a lot of lessons learned, as a town in general. So I think we have plenty to work on. If this kind of pivots into the next thing, it's like I really, one of the things that I noticed in talking to people I know and, just I don't think I even grasped the impact or the sentiment of existing business owners in town, people I've known for years, like I don't think I realized their concerns with the zoning. And they're probably always going to be, right. Like I know me personally, in the goal of this committee, there's not a business in town that anyone's looking to replace or get rid of. My thoughts have always been around new things and additional things that we can bring in. But as a business owner, that's a very legitimate concern. So I think for us, part of, going forward is really, building some credibility and some, rapport with the businesses that exist in town. The larger businesses, the ones we all know, Paxton Marketplace, the Paxton Pizza and Theo's, we all know those. But there's so many other businesses in town that we probably can, and so part of it is getting this infrastructure built up where we can have some documents stored and building a database of these businesses. There's a lot of work involved with that, but I think if we really keep pushing and get that part done, does anybody have, I was looking up ideas that other economic development committees do, to push, to try to just get some, extra people into, maybe we talk to, Paxton House of Pizza and say, what's your slowest night and your slowest hours? And we come up with some sort of event that drives some people there, in their slower hours. And you can't favor one business over another or whatever, but we can have different businesses at different times that we, maybe participate in a scavenger hunt or something like that, drives people there. So just some ideas I had. If anybody has, some specific ideas like that can help us, help, local businesses. Some other things were just a networking event, just getting people together saying, hey, if you're a local business in Paxton, come on up to, Seven Saws this night or whatever, and meet other business owners from Paxton, and maybe even have, somebody who works with businesses from a financial perspective, attend and, things like that. So I'll shut up.
think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea. Even just meeting the committee is a start. They don't know that this committee probably is even in existence. So, maybe like obviously right now it's a busy time of year, but maybe January, February, when things are quiet, we can create some type of like networking event. I work in banking, so we attend these events all the time, and it's great just to even get to know businesses in the area that are in Paxton and that we're here for them as a resource. I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. Jason, it sounded like Alexia just kind of volunteered to do that whenever you
I can take that on after December.
Yeah, I agree. Like maybe in January or February. Let's make that. I'll make that an agenda item for our next meeting. But get me, send me anything specific, you guys have for that. We can get pretty specific with it before the next meeting. And at least let's start with one event. And I like I said, I didn't anticipate the concern and the fee. It's totally valid, and I understand it now. With existing businesses in Paxton, they see all these big changes, and they're thinking, what's in this for me?
Yeah.
And it's a hard
I
question to
also
answer.
think there was information out there that was not correct, and there was information
Oh,
that we
absolutely.
Yes.
couldn't answer to, or didn't have the correct answer to provide them,
Yeah.
which I think created a lot of drama, and then it just kind of spiraled out of control.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I don't mind being on record saying that it was, yeah, that was not, yeah. And that's, I mean, with big changes like this, that's probably something that's going to happen all the time, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so yeah, it's a lesson learned, and everybody will have to, to get ahead of that. Not just us, but we'll have to think about things like that as we move on to whatever's next. I mean,
Yep.
does anybody have any specific other ideas or I don't want to put anyone on the spot. You don't have to bring it up right now. You're welcome to email it to the group. We can add it to the next agenda, but for networking events or just driving people out, to local businesses, anything like that.
Tony,
Yes.
the only, just by the observing from the town meeting, I felt that the zoning bylaw was turned down because the majority of them did not want it in their backyard for businesses. So you got the whole Route 122 going up to the center of town that people just objected having any type of business coming through Paxton. And the majority of the consensus is that you have individuals saying, we want to keep the town the way it is. We don't want the change. And that's the stumbling block that we're dealing with.
I agree, Pete. I couldn't agree more. I think it's a mix of those things, right? It's perspective, right? Because in my perspective, I look down that stretch and I say, wow, it takes a lot for a business to come in, even if you change the zoning and you change the map. I look at it and I say that takes a person who wants to sell, a business that wants to buy, but somebody else looks at that and says, hey, there's plenty of businesses that want to buy 3 houses and knock them down. Nobody really knows who's right and who's right until it goes through. It's a tricky thing, and I think you're exactly right. I think it's the, it's a not in my backyard thing, but it was a big area, so there were a lot of backyards and people who have them who showed up, and it's just how do you build the credibility to say there's nothing nefarious behind this, and I think that has to inform whatever happens next. We have to be ready to answer those questions and give somebody who owns a house there who, I think of the homeowner in that stretch who doesn't want to sell and thinks, wow, am I going to have 2 businesses behind me? To your point, I don't think we had good answers for that kind of stuff. And not us in general. I just think the town in general, it was a long process, but the public only really got involved kind of late. So those are all the things I think we have to overcome, next time. Because I don't know if nothing changes and it's the same thing and we're just trying to get it out there and do the same thing again. I mean, there's a lot of questions to answer for people. It's easy for me to be comfortable with it living on Marshall Street, like where we are, Pete, right? But the people who live right there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on 122, and like I didn't really have like much of an issue. I mean, I saw people's concerns, and like I think some of the concerns were it's like, it comes all the way down to me, and I'm like a minute from, the Worcester line. Did we really need to extend it down this far? Maybe not, who knows? But like, wouldn't we also like have control over like what? Because I think that was another thing people had issues with, is like people were like expecting like, oh, like gas stations and like big businesses. And I'm like, if you look at the practicality of it, no big business is going to come here.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, because like the pure amount of money that they would have to throw
Tony,
yeah.
this also answers a bunch of the questions, and honestly, I've been trying to be very careful about how I'm going to express some opinions because I don't want to come off as rude.
Yeah.
I'm just running on absolutely no sleep for almost 2 days now.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, with the weather. Yeah.
But here's the thing. As with numerous other voting events in town, it comes down to how uneducated and close-minded the public is. And what I mean by that, the example that you brought up that I've heard from numerous people, myself as well, what if somebody buys 3 houses and builds a Walmart or a factory, right? It's so far from reality. Like,
Yes.
giving a business license to somebody doesn't give them the right to do whatever they want, and people are under that impression.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, to Alexi's point, there
making
was some bad
something business zoning
information.
doesn't mean you tear down all of 122 and all of a sudden we're Route 9 in Shrewsbury. That's not how it works. Every change still has to go through planning board approval. It's just right now you can't even submit anything because it's not business approved to begin with.
Yeah, and so
That's what people keep
all your
failing
points
to
are-
understand.
Yeah, you're dead on. I think what I was bringing up about the 3 houses was more a revenue thing. Was when people were talking about the assessments, like, I didn't have a good answer for that when people asked me is what if 3 houses are bought and somebody just, the whole in
There's a
the assessment goes
spectacular
down.
there's a spectacular example of that in Worcester.
Yeah.
You know what? I can say the name of the business because the case is closed now. And I was very involved at the time. I lived in the area. I know the business owners very well. If you guys know Brattlestop Market in Worcester,
Oh yeah.
right in the corner of Holden Street and Grove Street, right? So the owner there owns the building. The building is a grandfather business, technically industrial zoning, but let's go with business zoning in this one. And he also owned the 2 houses behind it. What he was trying to do, because of issues with foundation and other issues with the building, the upkeep of the building essentially was far greater than the value of the building. He wanted to tear down the building, tear down the houses, and build a new building in the back. He originally did get it approved. The process took longer than it should, lost the approval. When it went back to vote, they did not allow him to tear down the residential home. So he's still able, the building is actually now up, the new building's up. It's far smaller than what he originally wanted to do because simply the neighborhood came up together and voted that they don't want a massive building and those houses torn down. It's the same exact thing. Nobody is going to buy 3 houses and bulldoze them and build the next Saint-Gobain in Paxton. And, one more thing, nobody's looking at that. There's no major business right now that's looking to come to Paxton, and just passing business zoning won't change that overnight either. And to your point, and another thing I wanted to say earlier when you were asking what's in for the other businesses, it is exactly that. It's additional traffic. If I go to Paxton Pizza at 8:30 at night and have some pizza with the friends that are visiting out of town, and now they close at 9:30, I want to keep my night going. Maybe I will go to Seven Sauce for a beer, or maybe there is a restaurant that's open until midnight that I can go with. Like, that's what it comes with it. And the key thing here is desirability. It's not just bringing 3, 4, 10 businesses in town and looking at specifically from real estate assessment tax value. That's not what we're going after. We want people to start moving to Paxton. One of the things I remember the first year, see, you may remember the numbers better than me, but we did an assessment the first year we had the committee on how many building permits in a period of time. I don't remember the period of time. I mean, it was like 9 months or something like that. Were pulled between Holden, Rutland, and Paxton. And it was 100 and something in Holden, 80 something in Rutland. It was 5 in Paxton.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think some of it too was the previous building inspector was I don't mind saying that publicly. He was difficult to work with. We had a reputation there, and I don't think we have the same problem now. And so you bring up some awesome points. And I try to separate the 2 halves of me, and I don't mind saying what I think personally. I agree. I think if you look at the data in Paxton over the last 10 years, population growth is slowing, right? You can see it in a lot of things in town. Like you see, Little League enrollment going down. There's a lot of things that it's not what it was 10 years ago, so people, not everybody, if they're not involved in these committees and stuff, you don't see it as quickly, right? And you hope that you can get ahead of it sooner when you're involved in things like this. And I agree with you. I think, you know, you have to increase the draw. I think part of this whole the zoning and just allowing for some more businesses in town is not about doing anything crazy or getting Amazon here or Walmart or even Cumby or whatever. You know, if those things come up, you deal with them. But it's more
It's
about, you know,
it's
adding to
not
the
even gonna happen.
territory.
We don't have the land for something
No,
like that.
I
It's
know.
not gonna happen.
Right.
And you know what's sad to what you were just saying? In my personal opinion, I don't have data ready to back it. We probably lost the most 5 profitable years of something like that. I don't think we will see the massive boom that we saw in new construction the last 5 years, 2019 to this year, probably in our lifetimes again. Somebody,
Yeah, no,
Jason, you're a builder, right? Or some construct. What do you do?
Yes, I'm a home builder.
I mean, have you seen anything like the last 5 years in your industry?
Yeah, I think it does cycle through. I mean, certainly like the 80s was a very big building boom. And then, you know, it got carried through the 90s, dipped during the 2000s, but came back up. So I think it goes.
And you know, the point I try to drive across in every conversation, in person, online, where people ask me, is it's controllable. We still decide if we're going to give permits as a town or not, either it's for a house or a business. Because people immediately look at Holden. They're like, we don't want to be Holden. We don't want to be Shrewsbury. That's fine. Let's not. But let's do a little bit better than where we are. And you may lose me for service. I'm crossing from Worcester now. There's always a dead spot here. But
that's okay.
another thing I want to say is because of the massive numbers difference in the votes, 300 something versus what 26. I think we got to scrap the whole thing, right? One of the big problems was the zoning, and I would not be surprised that of the 300 people that voted no, 150 of them lived on Pleasant Street. And one of the points that we kept hearing is why there, why there, why there. So you know what? Clearly, the town is not like whatever we pitch, whatever we explain, that stigma is not going to change. So if we're going to propose any sort of different business zoning, it has to be something completely from scratch. And you know, a lot of people were saying, why not whatever the route is towards Holden from the back end of town or towards Rutland, right? Okay, let's pitch that next. Let's how that's going to swing the vote. If it yields the same results, then we take whatever is it 52 over there? 50 what is there over DPW is?
Oh, 56.
56, right? So if we pitch a zoning at 56 going towards Holden and we still get 300 people to vote no, then we know that's not the problem. But if we see the numbers get closer, maybe we're on to something.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of good points. I think that's why I asked Heather, just to make sure whatever happens next, you know, we can't really make the decision in this committee to scrap it or do it or do whatever, but I think we can add to the process and say, have we looked at these other options? And, you know, and part of it too is it's great that we got 10% of people to show up and vote. You know, 80% show up and vote in the presidential elections, which we're so far removed from, but we're lucky to get 2 or 3% in the when we're voting for things that actually have to do with our town. So, you know, I hope they look at moving voting to a bigger venue. I don't know if the result would have been different or anything, but I think in general, I like to take a step back from this process. And regardless of how I feel about it, I look at it and say, we somehow as a town, we clearly, assuming that this was a good thing and had the potential to be a good thing, we didn't get that message out there good enough, soon enough. And that's not an indictment of anybody, you know, it's just, somehow we have to know the space that we operate within, and we have to be able to communicate this in a way that people feel good about it. If it's something to feel good about and we're not making them feel good about it, we're not doing it right, you know. So we've got to take a step back and make sure our messaging is on point with whatever happens next, you know. It's kind of
I agree fully, and I think Peter said it, especially about, you know, the whole Pleasant Street discussion thing. People, Peter and Heather actually said it. People saw the map, and that was it. You could have given them all the valid points, all the education. It didn't matter. They saw Pleasant Street turning into Route 9 in Shrewsbury, and that was it. There was no, all common sense went out the window after that. There was no more logical discussion.
Credibility with somebody to get them over that, right? And clearly didn't have it at this point. So,
I do. There's like one last thing I think that's on my mind is that like me and my fiance went down to like Kent, Connecticut. Like I think it was a couple like last month. And you know, it was like a small town. There's like it to me it's similar to Paxton where like you really kind of only have the center of town, and that's really kind of all we have in terms of, you know,
Yeah.
where kind of like foot traffic necessarily is. And like Kent, Connecticut was kind of similar, where like they just kind of have this main one drag. I mean, there was other roads and stuff, but like they just had this main one road that had some restaurants, it had some, you know, like had a
Hey,
bookshop and a coffee shop and, you know, various kinds of things. And like to
it's
me,
it's a pepper.
hmm?
Oh, sorry. Hold on, guys. Sorry,
Uh,
I thought I was
Yeah,
on mute.
oh no, you're okay.
that's right.
Sorry.
But it's that it to me that's and you know they had some state parks around people like it was
Yeah.
5 minutes away from the center of town, but to me that's kind of how I envision, you know, businesses coming in. Like you're looking for a small coffee shop. You're looking for small stuff that kind of I think make that center of town enjoyable and make people want to like stay and walk around and you know, because that's how you're going to get, you know, the businesses that exist, like Paxton House of Pizza, and you know, to get foot traffic in there is, I think, by
Right.
people. Yes, it's necessary for I think businesses for you to have to like drive to businesses, but like it's the foot traffic to me is I think what would really help, and I think
I agree. And that's
that's
why I think we need to be involved in the process going
a
forward.
yeah,
So
I
we're
agree.
not just thinking about what the process is, but what the messaging is around it. So people,
Yes, the
I had the
messaging I
same view
think
as you. That's what I
yeah,
saw coming in,
yeah,
but other people saw other things. And
yeah,
how do we talk them down, and honestly talk them down, right?
yeah,
If this is what we really want it to be. How do we, it's
yes,
not even just selling them on something, but making sure they understand hey, here's the safeguards that are in place so that the things that you're afraid of won't happen. That we have to
yeah.
have honest conversations about that when
Yeah,
we're going
I think
forward.
the biggest thing is really just I agree, like the messaging. It's just this next go around, we really need to be clear with what I think the vision for new businesses coming into town will be. Because
Absolutely.
I think
Agreed.
that's really where everything got off the rails, where like that really wasn't clear. They brought up the map, they had some, you know, we had dialogue on the, you know, the document, but like there was no one really stated what you know what we think we want businesses to come into town for. And I think
Right.
if we're clear with that up front, I think that should alleviate a lot of concerns because I think that's what people's issues were, was that they weren't getting a vision. They were just seeing, oh, new businesses, oh, this means these things. And I think it just derailed from there as it was likely always going to.
No, I agree. And, and
So,
and just adding on from what I said in the beginning too, is I think the other
yes.
part, that's the financial message, right? People kept going
Yep.
back to, well, we can't just rely on, you know, property taxes, but we didn't have a good answer for how the new businesses would bring in,
Yeah.
I'm a numbers person. Like if we're going to say it's going to bring in more revenue, I need a spreadsheet that shows me exactly how and where are the loopholes where somebody could expose it and, could a business come in and expose it and actually cause a revenue drop? Like I didn't have enough time, being new at this to understand that part of it. So going forward, that's something I think is this committee, we really need to have a grasp on,
Mhm.
working with the assessor, working with Heather and saying, hey, we can't go backwards financially for any kind of zoning we do. And how do we move forward? How does it bring in revenue, you know, without, detracting from, getting businesses in here. So I think that's a big part of it.
I think that is where both the planning board and also the select board will have to revisit the bylaws since it was
Mm,
turned down, and to revisit it and see what they can tweak as far as bringing it back, whatever the timetable is appropriate. But I know that Neil and Heather spent hours upon hours trying to update the bylaws, and it was really upsetting to a lot of people that they just had a closed mind. That's how I look at it.
I
yeah.
I would think too, like, I think a good next step maybe for this committee, I mean, obviously this committee is in favor of these zoning changes. And I think it's in our best interest. I mean, I think one of our next steps is being like the marketing side of these proposed changes. Like you're saying, we need to help get the correct information out there. And I don't know if that involves us doing, you know, gathering data that helps that, whether it's traffic flow or, you know, the surveys of townspeople, try to get a bigger survey of the town. My experience from that event we did, Tony, everyone I talked to was like, oh yeah, we would love more business. We love more business. But obviously
Right.
at the meeting,
Right.
everyone that was opposed to it seemed to have showed up and not the people that wanted it. So
Yeah.
you know,
I agree with you 100% because we kind of went down that path a little, but then I ran into a lot of questions I either couldn't or wasn't comfortable answering. So I think it's getting ahead of it. And, you know, some of those questions might come back internally and say, hey, did we think of this? Because this question is going to come up. And if you're trying to tell me, you know, we're doing this, this, and this, you know, we need to be able to have an honest message that, you know, that people, you just got that undertone that people felt like there was something you weren't telling them, you know, and perception's reality. If people feel like that, you have to be able to honestly, you know, like you said, Jason, we got to be able to market it or sell it like honestly and appropriately and have the numbers there and say, hey, look, this is how it's going to make your life easier. Here's how it's not going to make your life miserable. So we'll stay involved if it goes forward. Obviously, if anything comes to me in terms of us being involved with any committee or anything, I'll get it back to everyone. I have no intention of doing all that myself. We have too many smart people on this. So we'll make sure we have representation everywhere and anywhere we can. But awesome. Okay. So let's I'd really like our next meeting to be in person. I would have liked to have done that today, but Mother Nature had other plans too, right? But with the holidays coming up, is everybody okay with looking at maybe like mid-January for a meeting? And is there a better date or time to get, you know, people there in person? I know people's work schedules are crazy. And then Chuck, as soon as I know Chuck's been waiting patiently for the public session here. So once we get the meeting date, we'll move on to that.
Is there a reason why we started doing 5 or why it's 5 o'clock? Because I think like most stuff, isn't it like at like 6? Is there a reason that we started
Yeah, I
doing,
don't
you
really
guys
know
started doing
why.
5?
I know we've got some crazy work schedules here with people, and
I
mine's
mean,
pretty flexible.
I'm relatively flexible. I just, you know, I can get off work and I work from home on Thursday, so it's not that big of a deal. I was just curious if like,
Yeah,
because 5 o'clock is typically like the end of like a work day.
right.
And so
I
like
wouldn't mind
6
going
o'clock
later.
in theory
Thursdays-
would make more sense, but
Thursdays work good, but I wouldn't mind going to 6 o'clock.
I was
Yeah,
just curious.
could we try doing 6 o'clock in person on say like January 16th?
Is that a holiday?
No,
Mhm.
no.
Nope.
Oh, the only thing I'm thinking of now is I do have I don't have the basketball schedule in front of me, but I'm coaching the middle school girls basketball team, and our games are Tuesdays and Thursdays. But we may be done by then, so we could let's do we want to do January 16th, 6 p.m. tentatively, and then if that's a problem, we can talk about moving it. That we can handle that by email.
That one.
That works. 16th at 6.
Yeah, we'll say 16th at 6 p.m. We'll plan on the senior center. I'll find the schedule for the senior center or the public safety building. But I'll figure that out. All right, so if we're good on that, nobody has old business or additional new business or anything. Does anybody have anything else to add? Otherwise, I want to move on to the public session. I know Chuck's been waiting patiently if he has something he wanted to bring to the group or if he was just listening. So Chuck, the public session is open. If you have something you want to say, I don't know if you were just listening or if you had some words of wisdom.
I'm essentially just listening because I'm trying to figure out how to advocate for this, right? Because I was surprised by the anti-business sentiment at the town meeting.
Yeah, and you live in that area, right?
I live one house removed from
he's
it.
my neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so I think people overestimated the willingness of businesses to move to Paxton. Right? Because I view it as a positive.
I agree.
If House develops more, like, that's good. I mean, I have fond memories of taking my kids to House for honey sticks and walking down. But yeah, and I think you're right. I think you're on the right track in terms of JJ talking about like the vision. Like the vision isn't 122A in Holden. The vision is like sustainable business growth that helps diversify our tax base, that will help, right? And I think people get caught up in it's the same tax rate, like for a house or a business. So how does it help us? And I think the simple thing, I know Savas has talked about like it's not just the property taxes that bring the
Right.
money in from businesses. But I also think, and I'm not sure if this is true, I've been telling people this, but if you have a house with 2 or 3 kids or a business, the town is paying more to have that house with 2 or 3 kids there, right? Just from the education of the kids, right? So if you figure like if you put a number on how much it costs to educate a kid, a student in Paxton, and you add that, like, so there's 2 kids in the house, so let's say it's 7,000. I'm pulling that number out. That's a $14,000 burden on the town, and then you're not getting more than 10,000. So it's almost a deficit. Where if you bring a business in, I don't know if there's a way to figure out how much a business costs the town. I mean, I guess there's increased traffic and there's certain costs, but it's going to be much less than educating kids in town. So I think the math is if you have a business versus a house with 2 kids in it, the business is bringing in money to the town, and the house with 2 kids in is running a deficit, like it's costing the town money. So if you
Yeah.
just have a few more businesses, I don't know. So I think
I
you're
think
right.
you have
I
a
think
good-
if we have some
That's a
talking
great
points
point.
Yeah.
that
I
make
think
that
it's a really
case
good
about
point.
why it's good to have a few more businesses in town. I
Yeah.
know there are people in town who would amplify that. Like you see people on Facebook all the time, and if you get the right information in their hands in a way that's easy for them to understand, they're going to amplify it. Because I was just surprised that people don't want any more business. Not people, but like I think it's a small amount. And I think a lot of the people weren't even on Pleasant Street, right? I know there were people
Hmm.
from like up on Marshall
Yep.
that were anti, because
Like-
I think the fear is traffic. I think that's the main
Right.
fear.
But
Like,
like you're not gonna add that much. I mean, but like
Right.
we know that. But like you're
But it's easy for people to look at Holden, and if you're on
Yeah.
122 in Holden at the wrong time, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, like for me to get to the center of town at any time of day. There's barely no traffic. And I think people think they don't want anything to change, so there's a fear. So you kind of have to present the vision of like limited growth
Yes.
and then articulate how.
Chuck, you know what's great to the point you just said with Holden? Do you know how many years it took for Holden to have this level of traffic? Like it's yes, but yes, I agree. It's the fear of change, it's the fear of the unknown, and it's the examples near us, right? People constantly talk about Holden and Shrewsbury, and they don't see the bigger picture. And you know what? Tony did open the meeting with, a few tasks for us and a few points. And yeah, that may be one of our focus points, maybe, explain how the business will actually benefit without major impacts in daily life.
And I think there are more people on this side, on the side of economic development, than we realize. Because that meeting, the people who were pro economic development, there was no way they were going to talk at that meeting.
No, I
Right?
agree with that 100%. And
It was
Tony and
it
I
was
said the
crazy.
same thing when we were there. It was just too
Yeah.
heated.
Yep.
it was.
Right. So I think what people were struck by, I think you're right. They brought up the map, and then you look at all the red on the map, and you think like, oh my God, they're turning it into Holden, right? I think that's what people were reacting to. So I even think I don't even think if you have to relocate the business district to 56, I think if you just shorten it up, and then you can tell people, hey, we listened to you, we limited how much development is open. I think that's what people like. I think because it was all of 122 South, I think not South, but south of the center. I think that's what people reacted to. And it was a visceral reaction. It wasn't really based in fact.
The other thing too is they had, I mean, I don't know if like the town could have done like a better job, but I mean, like it was like the entire month of October, they had information sessions. And like that's what I think really confused me at the meeting was that you have all of these people that had all of these strong opinions against it and all of these questions. And it's just like the town gave them space to attend these information sessions and I think bring up those questions probably at that point. but everyone took the meeting as their time and space to understand what's going on and then ask their questions there. And I think,
That's a
I
good
don't know
point.
if the town can be more transparent moving forward with this next thing and really just be out in the open of what they're trying to do. Because I think, and if the town does that and people still really, really don't want it, then I don't know, like we put our best foot forward, but
Well, you got
I
to
think
put a lot of
that's,
weight on that document that was going around too. And I'm just being honest with that. That
yeah,
document
yeah,
was
yeah.
circulated intentionally in a timely manner
Yes,
with
yes.
some misleading information, which is unfortunate. Like if you're honestly opposed to this for, reasons that are personal or business or whatever, that's fine. But that had a big impact when you really only have 300 people voting and you're
Yep.
getting kind of mislead. Everybody's thinking you have adult bookstores coming to town. I mean, the reality is if I want to open an adult bookstore tomorrow in Paxton, I can do it. You can't really stop me. This wasn't going to do anything different for that. And I don't think that anybody's trying to do that. But that all leads to what I said earlier too, is kind of the credibility issue. Like somehow we have to build up that credibility with enough people that say like, no, these
Yes.
people who are doing this, they have the best interest of me in this town. Not
Yep.
everyone's going to agree, but there has to be a general feeling of, yeah, we're all on the same page at a certain level. We disagree on
Yep.
little things, but that was not we disagree on little things. That was a massive
Yes.
just departure from one
That's
viewpoint
just
to
certain
another.
people, and I think that people are busy. They don't have time to educate themselves
Yeah.
and
Yep.
come to the meetings. I understand
Yeah.
that, but I think JJ is right. If there's a vision, like a 1 or 2 line, hey, we
Mhm.
want to bring limited economic development to town to
Yep.
help balance our tax base and to do this, this, and this, while at the same time preserving like the rural aspects of our town. I think that's the common ground.
Yep.
Right. And I think
Yep.
people were there, they just didn't want change. And no matter what was said at
Yep.
that meeting, it wasn't.
Right.
And then Neil kind of put his foot in his mouth when he referenced like the
Yeah.
north versus the south side of town. And
Yeah.
like, oh, well, we didn't do it in the north because that looks pretty and it's rural. And it's like, oh, no, don't say that.
Arguably the worst possible answer you could have given.
Right. The
Yeah, and
logical
it's
part,
tough on the spot like that with the way that meeting was going. I wouldn't have wanted to be answering any questions. That was tough.
I'm surprised none of them have resigned since that meeting, to be honest with you. They put so
came
much
down from
work
other
into
boards. I know
that.
somebody stepped
Well, we
down.
did lose one person from the planning board, right? We lost Rob
Rob.
Pilsarski, I think, from the
Rob resigned, and I believe it probably, we have a planning board meeting on Monday. So Jason and I are on the planning board, and I want to hear basically the reason why he resigned.
Yeah, he's a good guy. That's not a good,
Anyway, I want to thank you for all you like these serving on these committees is thankless, and not more so than being at that meeting on like I can't imagine how you felt at that meeting. Anybody felt who serves on these committees, because it was crazy. It was the implication that people were in it for the money. I don't even know where they think this money is coming from.
or where it's going.
So thank you for serving on these types of committees because it's thankless.
Yeah, and likewise, Chuck. Having you come and show up and talk to this is huge because you do a lot in town, and I think you're pretty widely known and respected. So hearing your perspective on it, it's not coming here and yelling and saying you guys are all idiots. I don't
I'm
think
widely known. I don't know if I'm widely respected. But
I
think I'm going to be on the charter review committee, so like we might be able to address
Oh,
some
good.
stuff through that
Nice.
as well. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
All right. All right, good stuff. So I think, does anybody have anything else? Or Chuck, are you good? Did we get everything you wanted to say? Okay. Yeah, if nobody has anything else to add, we can.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Nope. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Usually the case. We're officially adjourned. Take care and have great holidays, everybody.
Yep.
If we don't speak
You
before the
too.
holiday.
Yeah.
You too.
All as well.
Jason, do we have each other's contact information by any chance? Are you on Facebook?
Facebook, yes. Oh,
Jason Berg. All right, I'll send you a message.
cool.
Personal request. Not